Hawaii has set ambitious goals. By 2045, we will transition from being the most oil-dependent state in the country to using all clean energy renewables for producing electricity. Although Hawaii ranks first nationally for residential solar per capita, the installation rate has dramatically declined since the 2012 peak. Along with wind, hydro, geothermal, and biofuels, what role will solar play in Hawaii's clean energy future? This live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff with Hawaii News Now. From 2007 to 2013, solar capacity in Hawaii nearly doubled annually. Since 2013, growth has slowed considerably due mostly to the end of net metering, which credited customers the full retail rate for the electricity they sent to the grid. Today, solar is the state's largest renewable source of energy and still growing. This week, Hawaiian Electric announced it will purchase power from what could be the state's largest solar facility on the north shore of Oahu. The solar industry is still hoping the legislature, though, will restore more incentives for consumer solar. Nearly 24% of the state's electricity comes from renewable sources. The state's official goal is to reach 100% by 2045. What role will solar technology play in helping Hawaii reach that energy independence? We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org. Before I introduce our guests, I want to mention that we invited a representative from the Public Utilities Commission to participate, but they declined due to pending dockets they would be unable to discuss. We also invited the state's Division of Consumer Advocacy, but they were unable to send a representative. Now to our guests. Rick Reed is the board president of Hawaii Solar Energy Association, an organization comprised of installers, distributors, manufacturers, and other providers of solar power. He is also the president of the Solar Ray Corporation in Honolulu and a founding member of the Hawaii Renewable Energy Alliance. Jeffrey Ono is the former executive director of the Hawaii State Division of Consumer Advocacy. He was involved in the decision to end net energy metering for new rooftop solar customers. He is currently a partner with Watanabe Ing Law Firm in the Government and Regulatory Affairs Group. Hermina Mina Marita served as chair of the Hawaii State Public Utilities Commission from 2011 to 2015. Prior to that, she represented the North Shore on Kauai on the State House for 14 years, where she also served as chair of the Energy and Environmental Protection Committee. And Dr. James J. Griffin is a faculty member at the Hawaii Natural Energy Institute, an independent research unit at the University of Hawaii. He has worked on several research projects analyzing grid integration and will be leading research initiatives to support the state clean energy goals. And let me start with you, Dr. Griffin. What is the current state of Hawaii's energy portfolio? We talked about 24% renewables, but what's within that batch?
Sure, so it's currently a mix of different things, and if you dissect it a little further, I think the report from the Hawaiian Electric companies last year was they reached 26% for the combined three companies that they operate, and Kauai reached 41% and anticipates getting over 60% by 2019.
So we're not at 24% anymore, we're up.
We're a little higher from, I think those reports just came in the past few weeks. And so when you look within, so the other side of that is most of the remaining generation is still oil-fired with some coal left on this island. But we've really seen a lot of rapid growth in different renewable sources over the past 5 years in particular. A lot of growth in particularly solar, both rooftop solar, utility scale solar, a number of new different wind projects on the islands of Maui and here. And if we look at, particularly the Big Island has the highest percentage of renewables, it's a little over 50% for last year. And they have a mix of geothermal, hydro, solar, wind, and some interest in biomass projects there. And a small percentage on each of the islands is some biofuel contracts with some local providers.
Okay, and Mina Marita, you were in the legislature when some of these goals were discussed and at PUC later on. How are we doing? I mean, are we doing well, not so well? Could we be doing better in this progress?
We've been really good at harvesting the low-hanging fruit and moving forward. And as there are more renewable and especially intermittent resources coming online, it is going to be a real challenge getting to higher levels, especially after 40%. Yeah.
What are the biggest challenges?
Integration, the technical issues, making sure that we have grid stability and reliability.
Jeffrey Ono, from the consumer point of view, are we doing well? Has this been good for consumers? Or are we, how's it going in that respect?
Yeah, we've been doing great. And, the price of these projects, renewable energy projects, have been coming down fairly dramatically. Something that I wasn't seeing when I first took my position back in 2011. We were seeing very high power purchase agreements from renewable energy developers, and they've been cut in almost half. So I think it's been very successful.
What's the factor that's cutting them in half? Maybe this is a good question for Professor Green. What is the factor that's cutting the cost of these big projects?
I think it's been technology and the scaling of basically the industrial scaling of some of these industries. So as China, Germany, other parts of the world have really aggressively gone after renewable technologies. I mean, the plants to build those, the solar panels and the other components. So the cost of the technology has come down significantly. And I think the commercial sophistication of the companies involved and increasingly the people entering those agreements here, I think, let Jeff weigh in a little more. But if you look at the contracts that were approved even 5 years ago, and Jeff's right, the cost has come down at least in half. And it's really a combination of all those factors. Growing experience and sophistication here locally and the ability to negotiate and enter into those contracts.
By the electric companies that are doing the negotiating?
All the parties. Those parties, but also, it's a complex mix. You have landowners that are, either selling or leasing their land, all of the different people involved in developing the projects, the labor. So I think it's the whole mix of factors, and as people get more experience building them, they understand how much costs need to come down, and people hold the line on. They generally wanted to keep seeing those costs come down, and there's the ability to compare to the benchmarks of projects built on the mainland, I think, is another factor that we have here, is there's more experience throughout the world, and particularly in the U.S.
Okay, Rick Reed with the Solar Energy Association, all this great news everybody's talking about, it, that hasn't really been the case of your industry. Could you describe what the last 3 or 4 years have been like for your industry, which primarily is providing rooftop solar, right?
Well, during the period when we had net energy metering, which allowed this retail transaction between the homeowner and the utility, we had very consistent, very steady growth.
Do me a favor, describe that for a consumer. What does that mean if you get a net metering agreement?
Well, basically, you would put a solar energy system on your home, and you had the ability to use electrons that were generated by Hawaiian Electric, or you also generated electrons, and it was sort of a transfer. And an arrangement was made, I think Mina was there when we did this legislation, that we moved from truing up every month to an annual true up. So you sort of sized these systems for their annual, when the sun's shining and the differences in solar insolation from month to month and that sort of thing. But you trued up annually, and at the end of that period, if you sold any power, not sold, that's the wrong, if you generated any power in excess of that you used, the utility got those electrons for free.
I've heard this transaction described, and just out of disclosure, I am the owner of a solar system that was a net metering arrangement. I've heard it described as being as we said in the introduction, basically the electric company is paying you the equivalent of a retail price for your power. So if the current kilowatt hour rate is 28 cents or 29 cents, that's what I'm selling power to the electric company. Is that a fair description of how it works?
You're not selling it. It's not a buy and sell arrangement, but yes, you were credited at full retail. And it was very advantageous to the homeowners that took advantage of that.
What kind of, at the end of the net metering, what kind of cost was it? How fast were people paying off these systems to the point where they're almost getting free power?
Oh, that really depends on the cost of the systems, and those were all over the map, and the size of the systems and your consumption. So it was both, your usage and the cost of the system that would determine how long it took you to actually amortize this. But there was a state 35% tax credit that we've had for some time. In 2008, 2006, the federal government enacted a 30% credit that they made extended for 8 years in 2008. It was extended again in 2016. So 65% of the system was being paid for by the federal and state governments.
Plus the net metering. Let me come back a little bit to that on you, but Jeffrey Ono from the former consumer advocate, what was your opinion about the way net metering worked? I mean, was it appropriate that it ended, or is it something that was going to have to end at some point?
It was appropriate that it ended. It probably should have ended sooner than it did. You know, the whole purpose behind net energy metering was to help kickstart the industry, to reward the early adopters, people who would put rooftop solar on their system. I mean, MENA was instrumental in having that law passed. But by giving a credit at full retail rate, it meant that customers who were getting net energy metering weren't paying their full share of the fixed costs. They weren't paying for transmission and distribution for the Hawaiian electric system. That fundamentally was not fair to those who could not get and who would never get rooftop solar.
Mina Maritas, so what was your vision when this first went into place of how long it would last?
So the law was passed in 2001, and it was an early adoption strategy to promote, with the renewable portfolio standard, a floor to jumpstart the industry. And in the law, there was always a cap, and there was an expectation of periodic review to look at the impact of the system.
The cap, now that you mentioned that, I remember it was like 20% or something, right?
Well, no, it was
0.5%.
0.5% of system peak,
So
which has no relevance.
Let me ask James Griffin, so what was the impact of net metering on the Hawaii solar industry? Not so much from a dollars and cents at the retail level, but in terms of the impact on the grid overall.
Sure. Well, I mean, you said in the beginning, particularly from 2008 to 2012, the industry was doubling, the amount of installed systems was doubling every year. And I think as Rick pointed out, I mean, the mode of operation was to size the system for the customers, roughly their annual energy bill. And so for most consumers that are gone during the day, that meant you're sending a lot of power out onto the grid. And particularly it's focused within peak solar hours, 4 or 5 hours of the day. So at small levels, I think the idea is that the grid has lots of capacity to handle that. At the scale that we see, that the program grew to is when you start to see kind of impacts on the overall operations of the grid, as well as localized impacts on the ability of the local infrastructure in our neighborhood to handle all of that solar power at the same time.
Let me ask, so Rick Reed, what was the impact when it sounds like everybody here is saying that it was meant to be limited, no one should have expected this was going to last forever, but just what was the real impact when it went away? Because it did go away pretty suddenly.
Well, the commission, in their wisdom,
The Public Utilities Commission.
yes, allowed for all of the folks that were in what we call the net metering or the NEM queue to actually install their systems over time. And that gave the industry some breathing room. It lasted about a year, maybe as much as 18 months. I think we still have a few residual folks that are working their way through that queue. Had they not done that, which I believe was the case in Nevada, it really would have put an end to things immediately.
Oh, so it wasn't like a cliff. It was sort of
Not
like if you got your permit and it took 17 or 18 months.
And that was his intended purpose. The commission was wise in doing that. And they adopted successor tariffs, one of which was basically allowed you to export energy at a lower rate that was closer to the commercial rates that we were seeing for these large solar projects.
So a new deal was put in place.
2 new deals. And the other would have been non-export systems that utilized some sort of storage. And
So off the grid kind of systems. Non-export?
non-export, You don't have to be off the grid. It's a technical discussion that I'd rather not have about what it means to be interconnected in parallel.
Well, I appreciate that, but I just want to make sure our viewers can follow what we're
It
talking
just
about.
means you consume all the power
Yes.
within your home
Yeah,
rather than
it's-
sending it
And you
out.
can still be connected to the grid and get those valuable grid services.
Oh, I see. So you're sort of protected by that connection, but you're trying to be completely independent.
You're
You're using it on site.
using it on site.
Right, you're not exporting any of the energy that's produced on your rooftop out to the grid.
I think that our viewers are appreciating my ignorance because this is really a good explanation. So go ahead.
Think though in terms of solar water heating system or energy efficiency, it's almost the same thing. Your objective with a battery storage system is to really reduce your loads, and since export is not possible anymore, that's the game that we've got.
Do you feel, though, after the other comments we've had, that it was as devastating as it was to the industry? I mean, there was a lot of activity, and now it's way down.
Yeah.
Do you feel like this was sort of inevitable, and now we're just in this period of adjustment?
Yeah, I think it was inevitable, and it's, you know, we're out in the middle of the ocean, and we sometimes lose sight of the fact that 50 other states are talking about the same issues and the same challenges, and wherever net metering really gained a lot of traction, those commissions and regulators are facing exactly the same set of issues and challenges and problems as to, you know, what to do with what sometimes is excess power during any given time of the day. And that's led into this entire storage discussion because, you know, there's lots of parts to the solar industry. I mean, we talk about rooftop solar, but, you know, we have members that have you know, unionized electrical contractors that put in utility scale projects.
You know, I'm going to go back to that a little bit later in the show when we talk more toward the future. But one of the points that we made in the introduction was that, I mean, I think HECO the agreement that they just signed with this new solar power generator in central Oahu or the North Shore was like 12 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's pretty spectacular. I mean, is this ahead of the game? I mean, when you see that, what do you think about what's going on?
Well, you know, one of the things that we're facing is rooftop solar is only used by about 25% of the Hawaiian Electric customers. And so you still have services that you have to provide for 75% of the customers throughout the island. So with utility scale solar, at least other customers are able to participate in this energy transformation and hopefully receive some benefits like a little bit more stable pricing.
Jeff, on that question, do you feel like the rooftop is basically done its part, and now we're going to see a much slower growth there and more big industrial type?
I think we're going to still see rooftop solar. I think it'll be at what I would consider a much more sustainable growth. I mean, it was growing at unsustainable levels. And I wanted to comment about those NRG contracts that you brought up, because
NRG is
they're the independent power producer, the developer who actually took over those projects from Sun Edison.
Okay, right.
You know, a couple of years ago, Sun Edison had missed key milestones in fulfilling their obligation under their power purchase agreements. And there was a lot of knee-jerk reaction out in the public that, you know, Hawaiian Electric was wrong in terminating the contracts when it did. But if you look back at Sun Edison's history and what actually happened, they were on the verge of bankruptcy. And Hawaiian Electric, I felt, had a legitimate concern, had legitimate reasons to terminate those contracts. And what the end result was, Sun Edison went through the bankruptcy, NRG purchased those projects from Sun Edison in the bankruptcy, and we've got lower priced projects. Hawaiian Electric was successful in negotiating those contracts down from 13.5 cents to 11.5 cents and 10.5 cents. So it was a net benefit to consumers.
I got a caller calling in, and this kind of goes to, you know, some of the thinking that we had 5-10 years ago about what our future was compared to what we have today. And the question is, what is the status of the Inter-Island Cable Initiative? Mina Morita, I think you're probably the best one, and I think that Dr. Griffin after that. What is the status of that? Is it is it no longer necessary? No longer, has it been completely eclipsed by the improvements in technology and economics of other sources?
Hawaiian Electric is going through its planning process right now, and it's not I don't believe, did they take it out of the PSIP?
No, it's been, well, go ahead.
Oh, the Power System Improvement Plan. So it doesn't play a significant role in the Power System Improvement Plan as
I think the question becomes, has this need for humongous wind farms being plugged together to the inner islands, is that still there? Or is there still a reason to have inter-island cables?
I think the proposal itself has gone through various iterations. I think certainly compared to the first round of this, or looking at building the projects on Molokai and Lanai, there's no, I mean, the commercial interests that were involved in that are no longer, actually no longer here in the state, at least for First Wind. So that then moved there was a consideration of intertying Maui Island to Oahu. And some of the first rounds of that planning, Hawaiian Electric said it wasn't necessary to meet the lower 40% goal that the state had. And then in the most recent round of planning, it's a longer term question now. Is it possibly necessary to reach the 100% level? So I think the question has been put off into the future, at least for now, for the various planning processes that they have going.
Okay, so basically kind of the money isn't there right now for that kind of investment.
maybe the urgency isn't
The urgency, I mean, the companies that were considering that in the past few years they're no longer, it's just not a project that's going to happen in the immediate term.
Rick, read back to the rooftop solar. What is the condition of your industry right now?
I'm trying to put a smiley face on this to the extent possible, but this was a contraction that some of us had been planning for, and some companies are built for growth and expansion, and some companies are built for both that and hard times. And the folks that are built for the long haul, that have been through it before or something similar to this, are scaled. And those that are scaled and diversified are finding some success. There's a lot of parts to the solar piece, and it's not just the rooftop piece. There's also something called standard interconnection, where you see commercial facilities that just have really, really large loads, where no matter how many panels you put on the roof, it's just never going to export any power. That's still a fairly robust market, and some of the market participants are doing well in that space.
So they use it to reduce some of their electricity
just like you would with solar water heating or any kind of energy management system or the like. And if I might just for a second too, if that answers the question, go back to the cable piece. I think it's the hope probably of some regulators and policymakers that this whole business of distributed energy resources, which is not just DGPV, it's storage. It's and there's lots of storage. Water heating is storage.
DGPV is what?
Oh, distributed generation photovoltaics.
So that rooftop solar.
Yeah, but this whole piece, there's lots of it, and including storage and rooftop PV.
I wanted to move to that. So
Sure.
the improvement in storage technology must be really something you guys are excited about.
Yeah, very much. I mean, if you look at what's going on with the motive piece of it, the automobile industry, there has been a lot of production built in the past 5 or 6 years all over the world. It's not just the quote-unquote Tesla gigafactory. I mean, there's a lot of factories of scale all over the world, and they're about 40% in production, so you see huge price cutting. And you've seen prices come down 40 or 50 or 60%. And that in conjunction with some of the car manufacturers that are in the game, and who's not. I mean, everyone's taking a look at this. BMW, Mercedes, a lot of them now are making storage, a part of their energy portfolio outside of their motive car business. So there's a lot of hope for continued declines in the price of energy storage, and there's a lot of money in that space and a lot of people working on it.
Let me ask Dr. Griffin, what is the relationship between storage capability and the different possible mixes of alternative energy. I understand wind is intermittent, solar is intermittent. Is this the key to actually the future of alternative energy or renewable energy is the capability of storage?
I think it's one of the key pieces that what you've seen is the really rapid decline in the intermittent sources, the cost of the wind and solar. And then once you add enough of those projects into each one of these islands, you start needing new tools to help integrate and balance out the variability. And it's a mix of things. It's modifications to the existing generation plants, but storage has been and will continue to be a huge one, both for the utility scale, how you help the overall grid operate, but also in the customer side.
And then for the rooftop folks, I mean, some of these storage things are huge, meant for great big intermittent places like the wind farm. I was reading that Maui has more per capita storage than any place in the country or something like that, right? Because they've got the wind farms that they're storing for. But you know, if people are looking at putting the solar on their house with a battery, how's that penciling out? And is that still need some kind of incentivizing? And why would you incentivize it? I know there's some bills in the legislature. How do you see incentives going ahead? What are you hoping for?
Yeah, it's still an expensive proposition, and again, putting the best face on it, it adds cost to the PV. PV plus storage is more expensive than just net metered PV. That's a fact of life.
And you're not going to get net metered PV.
No, you're not. Well, let's talk about
You're still
KAUC.
hoping-
KAUC is not.
But they're not net metered.
Is not HECO. They're not net metered, but they still all export. So they're put Kauai into the mix, and there's still an opportunity to export at a lower level. But in terms of the storage piece, there's a lot of players, and yet it's still a very expensive proposition. I think the popularity of solar storage is going to happen, and I think solar itself is extremely popular. I mean, it adds to consumer choice. It can drive down. You put in a large project, a utility scale project, and bless their hearts, overall this is going to keep rates from. They're going to go up more gradually than they would otherwise, and it also insulates us from oil shocks and that sort of thing. But check your electric bill next time a large plant goes on scale. The real way out of this thing for a lot of consumers is to be able to generate some or all of your own power on site, whether you export it or not. And it's just the same as really a lot of energy efficiency in a non-export market. But storage is critical to that, and storage is expensive. So I think the legislature is taking a hard look, and other policy folks, at whether or not, if you have a tax credit that just incents PV, but you can't export from that PV, maybe we should just take some of that off the table and provide incentives for storage, which seems to be a future that I think we all pretty much agree upon is what we're going to have.
Jeff, I could see you smiling when you say that.
Well, I believe in storage, and there's some incredible things going on in battery technology. The solid state battery, it might be the breakthrough that we're looking for that doesn't use lithium. It uses sodium instead. But the problem with providing these kind of incentives, like the proposal that I've seen to use the green energy monetized securitization fund as a rebate for customers who install batteries, it distorts the market. The market ought to decide which technology should prevail. And Rick is right. Storage is not just batteries. It's water heaters, it's air conditioners. Anything we can use that basically heats or cools can be used as a storage device. And those are underutilized technologies right now.
Does that mean, go ahead.
I'll just add one thing. I mean, we've been talking about storage. I think particularly when we're talking about the small scale distributed stuff, the other key piece here are the IT advances that are allowing or continuing to, that will allow to network those devices and interface better with the utility. So it's the combination of both the devices themselves, but the smarts that are getting built in and how they interface with the system.
Marita, is it your opinion that the market's going to provide for this, or do you feel that there needs to be some sort of incentives either at the retail level, the grassroots level?
The market we should allow the market to work. Right now, there's these subsidization issues, and there's a real, for me, there's a real concern how ratepayer monies and public monies are being used to subsidize customer side improvements rather than the grid improvements where we all benefit from.
Okay, explain that a little bit more. So what, as I understand what you're saying is, you've got X amount of money you can use to
We
help
have a
manipulate
small,
the market.
we have a small pot of money that we have to be very careful in how we use it. You know, for years we've been spending money on the customer side of the meter for these individual benefits. We really need to look at this pot of money and how we can make system-wide improvements where everybody benefits. You know, grid modernization. You know,
If we're talking about grid modernization, that's exactly what he was talking about. Is you know, making it smoother. I want to give you a chance, Rick Reed from the Solar Association. I mean, one more pitch for incentives at that consumer level.
I've made my pitch. The legislators, legislators right now are in conference discussing a bill that would do that. I take Jim's point. Just point. I'm a little conflicted on whether we should use this GEMS money that I think you're.
So GEMS money, it comes basically from a tax on our electric bills. It's a big fund. It's $150 million or so that's kind of just been sitting there.
Yeah, and that's probably why people felt that this might be a better use for those funds. But you know, its intended purpose was really for hard-to-reach communities and folks who couldn't otherwise take advantage of some of the conventional leasing opportunities. And it seemed like a pretty good idea at the time. But a few things have happened. It was administratively rather complicated, but I think more importantly, it came along at exactly the same time that you couldn't export energy anymore.
Let me make one more argument on this. When you use GEMS money, because it's a fee that all ratepayers pay on their electricity
I use the
bills.
word tax, but
Yeah, it's a surcharge. It's a fee that's put on everyone's bill, and then you give it as a rebate for batteries. Right now, PV plus batteries, solar system plus a battery, they're still very expensive. So what you're doing is you're taking ratepayer money and you're giving it to the wealthiest consumers in our state. And I think that's just fundamentally unfair.
Okay, so let me get some questions here. And I apologize to our viewers for not doing this. We're getting a lot of questions sort of about the future. I want to do a couple questions that are more immediate. Caller wants to go off-grid and was planning to purchase solar panels. The metering cost is very expensive. Can the state offer incentives to encourage more homeowners to go solar? I'll give you another shot. You sure?
I was busy taking a note. Restate, please, for the
Basically,
record.
saying, so the metering cost is very expensive. I don't know if that's
The cost of the
utility
meter
cost.
itself?
The metering, he says the metering cost is very expensive. I don't know exactly what he's talking about. He wants to go off-grid.
Ah,
Can I kind of pose
Yeah,
the
please,
question?
yeah.
Why should I, as a taxpayer, subsidize somebody that wants to go off-grid?
Because it's a good thing for
what's
people
the
to.
social benefit of that?
Oh, so the whole issue raises the whole issue of going off-grid. Is it something that we should be encouraging?
If he wants to make that investment, he should do it on his own and not rely on taxpayer subsidies or ratepayer subsidies.
Because he's going to be subsidized by his lack of an electric bill. Right?
It's his choice.
What about the idea of off-grid? I mean, are there concerns about a lot of people going off the grid? We heard horror stories about the death spiral of utilities if, you know, it gets to the point where people can go off-grid and do better. Is that a real risk?
Yeah, I think, we were talking about this before the show started. Rick said he's been in this business for a long time and generally encourages people not to go off-grid. I think significant benefit to being interconnected to that network, significant cost to going off-grid. It's always a choice that people have, but by and large, very few people have been exercising that choice. So I think, the whole vision here is that this is a interconnected system where people are going to see broader benefit from staying on rather than disconnecting.
The problem is that there are fixed costs that are shared by everyone. And those transmission and distribution fixed costs don't necessarily go down by the same amount by one person leaving the grid. So what you end up with is one less ratepayer, one less consumer to contribute toward those fixed costs. So it's bad for everyone, or everyone who's left behind.
Is it fair to go back to a point that Jeff made earlier? I'd like to debate the fact that, that the bill, it's called HB 1593, that's in conference right now. It would not necessarily benefit the wealthiest, participants in the program, because it's means tested, and they tried to hew to the original purposes of the GEMS fund to get to the harder to reach communities and folks that were disadvantaged. And you get more rebate the lower your adjusted gross income.
Okay. So I do want to keep going with some of these various questions, and this is again kind of on the off-grid question. Would it be possible to take a small community in Hawaii as a pilot project and introduce all sustainable options, then use the results to inform the rest of the state? Anybody? There's a couple places that have tried that, right? I mean, they're completely off-grid communities.
Mililii, many years ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But did we learn much from that? Or it sounds like what you folks are saying is that it's not necessarily good to have somebody off the grid, even if it's a community.
I'm with Mina. I think it's a choice, and there's a lot of folks in days gone by and to this day that wanted to live in Hawaii and chose living in a lava field because it was the cheapest land that they could find. And they had a tin roof and a big catchment tank, and they bought some PV panels, and they bought either a gas refrigerator, or they had a little propane water heater, a solar water heating system, and that was the way they chose to live their lives. And I think that if you're far away from telephone poles and that's your desire, more power to you. If you're actually presently interconnected, I think, and this is the once and future issue, we need to work through just how all of us interact here, where there's a lot of DG on this system, where people want DG, where people want energy storage, where utility scale plays its role. And I also agree with Mina, we get above 50%, things get more interesting. Colton Ching, who's a senior VP at Hawaiian Electric, recently said that the problem on Oahu it's going to be where do you find the generation resources. Once you get above 50, then it is going to have to be all of the warehouses and rooftops and everything and storage. You're just going to need all of this to get to 100%, especially on this island.
Well, yeah, let's talk a little bit about, describe, Jeff Ono, former consumer advocate, what is the 100% energy goal? What does that really mean for electricity? I mean, I've been told that, well, it doesn't really mean it's 100%, but in layman's terms, what does that mean? What are we trying to get to by 2045?
We're trying to get, right now, the way the law is written, it's 100% of electricity sales is going to be delivered with renewable energy. So that's, and so what it means, and the loophole that people keep pointing to is that because it's measured by electricity sales, if someone generates electricity with say a diesel generator, distributed generator, that wouldn't count toward the 100% renewable energy. So you could do that. You could do a combined heat and power unit. But right now, if we want to have a reliable, secure system, we're going to have fossil generation for a long time to come.
Could you comment on that? I mean, what is, so that people understand, I mean, so are we able to get to 100% renewables by that goal, by that time?
Put it this way, how much you want to pay for it. It's a cost issue.
So I think there's a couple of cuts at it. One, I think particularly what we've seen with technology improvement, particularly on the neighbor islands where they're really rich in renewable resources, smaller population, we can get to really high percentages. Kauai has really been leading the way in the past few years. And so the trajectory is going right along with technology and economics. It's the last 5%, 10%, 20%, we don't know exactly what it is. That's where it gets to be more difficult.
I see.
But we've given ourselves enough time. So I think the trajectory in the next 10, 15 years, we're going to see, we have the opportunity to displace a lot of the oil we're using now cost effectively with the technologies that are available. There's still, all the issues that we're talking about are in play, but I think the way I look at it, the tide of technology and economics is going along with public policy here. So we're doing the right thing for this time frame, and as we get out to that point in the future where it gets harder, we'll make those decisions when we come to it.
You know, I do have a caller inquiry, and I'll put this to you, Bina Marita. A caller inquiring about plans to put solar panels on schools and libraries where lights and air conditioning are used regularly. What are the panelists' thoughts? But when you talk about what cost are we willing to pay, when you talk about public facilities adding solar and stuff, it's less about saving money as it is adding to the capacity of the renewable portfolio, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, things like schools, you know, these are all daytime uses. And here, you know, we're having all of this solar being generated and no demand for it. You know, so wouldn't it be better to look at how we price electricity, where schools, public buildings, which are daytime operated, get a break? They don't have to generate, but they can use the electricity being generated from other places.
I've got a question here along the lines of this excess PV production. Now, I've heard a lot about how big a challenge that is. That is, if you could find a way to capture all that energy being generated at the peak, you could pretty much take care of the rest of the day. Is that a fair subject? No, let me just read the question. To keep solar companies viable, how about using excess PV production to produce hydrogen to address the problem of storing electricity and using hydrogen fuel infrastructure? Are there federal funds available to offset? But ideas like that, to take that excess power off the grid and then reuse it later, storage, I mean, is that a viable idea, hydrogen?
So that we have a very active research program at HNEI looking into this exact topic, and doing some of the different demonstration projects right now to prove out all those concepts. And so I think it's definitely part of how we look at, particularly, I mean, if you can use that hydrogen not only for creating electricity, but for other types of purposes, transportation. I think that also looked at using it for fuel to make fertilizer. So I think if you look at the whole range of byproducts, these are the things that we're looking into. But I think the general idea is basically how do we find better ways to align the supply to the demand, and there's two pieces to it. It's the storage is going to help you shift the supply into the times that you need it. As the former Chair Morita said, newer types of pricing programs that give people better price signal to use more electricity in the middle of the day. I mean, it's a pretty novel concept compared to the past where you're trying to get people to use more electricity at night. That was difficult to do, but now we actually have a surplus, and when energy should be getting cheaper in the middle of the day. And so I think those are all parts of the mix of reforms that are going to help all these pieces fit together.
Let me throw some, we've got a lot of questions about different technology for storage or for new generation that's not as intermittent. Question here, does the Governor's Renewable Energy Committee, is there such a thing as a Governor's Renewable? No, but anyway, that would be, but is ocean thermal energy conversion in the mix? Here's another one, where is the moving water uphill for storage option conversation? And so I'm just wondering, and then I've heard of the idea is, we subsidize people to charge their cars in the daytime instead of at night. I charge mine at night because I don't have any place to plug it during the day. I mean, what are the most promising sort of technologies that are near term that, say, in the next 10 or 15 or 20 years that are going to be coming in? Any thoughts, Bina Marita?
Well, I think, you know, a lot of people are looking for panaceas right now in trying to say, you know,
you mean there's no panacea?
There's no panacea, I'm sorry to tell you. But, you know, we really have to do a whole host of things, a variety of things to get us where we need to go. And, you know, how do we do that with the least amount of money and getting the most efficiency, productivity from those kinds of investments? And unfortunately, we've been so focused on the generation side. We really need to look at the economics of moving forward. When is the right time to invest in certain technologies? How to make the
Well, isn't the problem, though, that people want all this to happen without them having to change their behavior? They just want to have the same lifestyle they always had. I mean, right?
Yeah, smart guy, Amory Levins, said that what people really want from their utility is hot showers and cold beer. They want energy services. They don't give a rip about most of this stuff.
when they want it.
When they want it,
Yeah.
exactly, and they want it at a really inexpensive price. And would that it were that simple, you know?
Jeff Oda, do you think that people will change their behavior to do this when we've seen time and time again the crisis is predicted and the crisis goes away when some technology jumps up and takes care of it?
Well, people will change their behavior if the price signals are right, if they're compensated for it. So, we talk about demand response, which is a form of, to me, it's a form of you're accepting less reliability. Your air conditioning gets turned off for an hour in the evening. Your water heater will get turned off for an hour. But you get paid for it.
Somebody outside my house?
But somebody outside of your house. But you get paid for it.
And I think the next piece, so that's that's how that set of technologies have worked in the past. What you're seeing a lot more automation in the devices themselves and intelligence. So
We're talking about smart meters, is that what we're talking about?
we're talking about smart devices, smart homes, so different types of building automation that can talk to all these devices and receive signals from the utility, whether it's a price signal or a direct control signal. And it's the exact work that's going on right now within the utility and the regulatory structure to help set up all the different programs that are necessary so that people have the right incentives to then install those technologies in their home and their business.
So is that where the next place your industry may go is, okay, hey gang, here's a bunch of stuff you can put in your house. It may not be a solar panel and a battery, but it's going to have an equivalent effect on your electric bill.
I think so. Software really changes everything, and what I don't think people realize about the whole battery bit is it's not just a battery. It's not like your car battery that, if you did live off grid, you used to buy 12 of those things and charge them up, hook the red and the black wires up and away you go. Now it's a system with an energy management device, which is basically software, and it's interconnected to the inverter. And we're talking about smarter and smarter inverters that can provide all sorts of services to the grid potentially, and HECO's demanding those kinds of services from these inverters. But that's only half of the equation. A really smart suite of software is going to not only deal with your battery management and your load, they're going to deal with your loads and your demand inside your house. It will turn things off and down. It's going to do all of this stuff. And we've been through smart homes and all sorts of iterations of this for about 25 years. But we're now to the point where the software is really taking off and all of this stuff becomes much more feasible, much more cost effective than it was in the past.
We're getting a lot of callers who are asking about different kinds of PV or electrical generating stuff, roof tiles, paints, coverings. A lot of people very excited about generating electricity on their homes. Sounds like that's not the number one technology we're talking about. But there's also sort of questions about the long term, like what is the fate of the installed electrical generation, oil, coal plants, et cetera? If they're abandoned, who absorbs the cost? Jeffrey, I don't know.
Well, if they're independent power producers, their contract ends, they absorb the cost. If it's owned by the utility, then there's the potential for what they call stranded assets, a stranded investment. Then the utility is going to look to the ratepayer to pay for that.
Is that why there's so much scrutiny every time they want to build anything that's not renewable?
Well, that's one reason.
Well, any major investment made by the utility is looked at with scrutiny with the potential of this stranded cost.
We haven't talked on this subject, and I don't know whether our audience can tolerate it, so I'll just very briefly. I mean, there's talk about our utilities becoming more of distribution systems instead of generation systems. Is that sort of a big watershed change in the way we look at our utilities?
Yeah, before it was kind of like a pipeline. You generate electricity and you deliver it somewhere. You're looking at utilities evolving to become a platform, so a facilitator of various kinds of transactions.
Let me ask though, another caller asked, if a whole bunch of my friends and I go off the grid, if 40 to 50% of the customers follow his example and they all disconnect from the grid, what is the future for, especially Maui Electric specifically, but for utilities? Is this something that needs to happen sort of gradually, and that if it goes too fast, there's actually a risk to ratepayers and utilities as organizations, as companies?
Well, at that scale, 40 to 50% is
not going to happen?
well. I mean, if that did happen, then that's a serious problem. But the question, I mean,
So let me get clear though. So if 40 to 50% of the houses in an area went off the grid, that would be a serious problem.
40. So let's be clear. I mean, so residential customers roughly.
Adding battery and storage to go 6 to 10 days without the grid, if 40 to 50% of the customers follow the example. I think he's trying to come up with a real world challenge to how much independent, living in off grid almost kind of people there are. How can this go too quickly and cause damage?
There's a certain point that if you lose enough of your sales, enough of your revenue, utilities in a serious problem. So, what that exact tipping point is, I don't think anyone is fully calculated. But when you're talking 40, 50%, that's huge. But you got to, that option is available today, and so even those that have installed all these devices almost always stay grid connected.
But I think what they have to ask themselves, are they prepared to make the investments necessary to have redundancy, reliability?
That's what I'm saying. You can do that today, and by and large, very few people do. So, the question is, as these technologies get that much cheaper, I think that's the point put out by a lot of people. And I think the proactive way to look at this is we're trying to direct the utility in a place where there's a lot more value in all these customers staying connected, but still having these choices available to them, and not in a way that doesn't put other costs on the other customers.
Question from a Kona viewer: where does conservation fit in this argument?
Glad they brought it up.
I'm an old guy now, and when I started to do this, working actually for the Federal Department of Energy many years ago here, there was what we called the loading order. There were you recommended things be done in a certain sequence. That do your lighting, paint your roof white, that sort of, put in a solar water heating system. This is way before PV was cost effective, but you did things in a certain order. And I think also both HECO and KIUC talk about right-sized PV systems, a little bit smaller and that sort of thing. But one way to make that possible is, if you think of this as a bucket with holes in it, just pouring more water in it with a bigger PV system than you need is not the right way to do things. You plug the holes, and you plug the holes with energy efficiency. Make sure you've got up-to-date appliances, and there is a cost there, but it's a lot less expensive than buying more generation than you need. So it's still a combination of doing efficiency, and this is a plug for Hawaii Energy, by the way. They need it because they do great work, and it's necessary work. So if you do all of this stuff, the less expensive things first, then you put a right-sized PV system on your house, I think you're just in a better position overall.
We've got only a couple minutes left. I'd like to go around with everybody. Are you very optimistic about our energy future in Hawaii? Are we going to be much better off in the 30 or so years when we reach these goals than we are now?
My answer is absolutely, and we also don't have much choice, in the sense that, but again, I go back to the technology and the economics are aligned with the public sentiment here. We have a lot of work to do in working out these details, and there's transition on really all party side. The utility is going to have to operate differently. we're looking to set up markets to provide a lot of these services rather than kind of the older programs that we've had. There's a lot of work.
I mean, Marita, you've been crusading on this for many, many years. What's your feeling about the future now?
Well, I live on Kauai, and I'm a member of Kauai Island Utility Cooperative, and I'm really proud of the direction that the utility is going, and I think that serves as an example throughout the state and the world of what can happen.
Jeff Ono?
I'm very optimistic, but I will say this, you know,
For consumers.
For consumers, it's going to take everyone working together, and you know, it's not always Hawaiian Electric's fault when things go wrong. Developers have to deliver projects on time and on budget, and only then will we have a truly successful renewable energy future.
So Rick Reed, to close this, you got about 10 or 15 seconds. Even with what your industry's been through, are you excited about the future?
Yeah, I am, and I'm with me, and I'll put in a plug for KIUC. I think that utility has done an absolutely fantastic job in maintaining a mix between distributed generation and utility scale projects.
Thanks very much. We're out of time. I want to thank all our viewers for joining us tonight, and thank you to our guests, Rick Reed from the Hawaii Solar Energy Association, Mina Morita, former Public Utilities Commission Chair, Jeffrey Ono, former Hawaii Consumer Advocate, and Dr. Jay Griffin with the Hawaii Natural Energy Institute, not industry. Next week on Insights, millennials are being told they will have to work 7 years longer or save twice as much as their parents to enjoy a comparable retirement. But they start out with so many challenges, including the uncertain futures of Social Security and Medicare. We'll hear what kind of advice millennials receive from people familiar with the financial planning challenges they face. Until next time, I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Ahui ho.